Welcome back to the Biblical Archive. Today we explore the remarkable life of Moses, one of the most important leaders in the Bible. His life is a story of faith, courage, struggle, and miracles. From the moment he was born, his life was marked by danger and purpose. He would grow from a helpless baby placed in a river to the man chosen by God to free an entire nation from slavery. Long ago, the people of Israel were living in ancient Egypt. Generations earlier they had come to Egypt during a time of famine, and at first they lived peacefully there. Over time, however, their numbers grew greatly. A new Pharaoh rose to power who did not remember the good that the Israelites had once done for Egypt. Instead, he feared that they might become too powerful. Because of this fear, Pharaoh forced the Israelites into harsh slavery. They were made to work long hours building cities and monuments for Egypt. Their lives became filled with suffering and hard labor. Pharaoh's fear grew so strong that he gave a terrible command. Every Hebrew baby boy that was born was to be killed. During this dark time, a Hebrew woman named Jochebed gave birth to a son. She knew that if the Egyptians discovered the baby, he would be killed. For 3 months she hid him carefully. But as the baby grew, it became impossible to keep him hidden. In a desperate attempt to save his life, she made a small basket and coated it so it would float on water. She placed the baby inside and set the basket among the reeds along the Nile River. Nearby, the baby's sister Miriam watched from a distance, hoping to see what would happen. Soon, Pharaoh's daughter came down to the river to bathe. While walking along the riverbank, she noticed the basket among the reeds. When she opened it, she saw the crying baby. She immediately felt compassion for him and realized he must be one of the Hebrew children. Instead of allowing the child to die, she decided to raise him as her own son. The princess named him Moses, which means, drawn out of the water. Moses grew up in the palace of Pharaoh. He received the education, training, and privileges of Egyptian royalty. He learned the wisdom and culture of Egypt and lived a life surrounded by wealth and power. Yet deep inside, Moses knew that he was not truly Egyptian. He was a Hebrew, and his people were suffering as slaves. One day, when Moses was grown, he went out to see the labor of his people. While watching them work, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Anger rose within him as he witnessed the injustice. Looking around to make sure no one was watching, Moses struck the Egyptian and killed him. He then hid the body in the sand. The next day Moses returned and saw 2 Hebrews fighting with each other. When he tried to stop them, one of them asked if Moses intended to kill him just as he had killed the Egyptian. At that moment Moses realized that his secret was known. When Pharaoh heard what had happened, he tried to have Moses killed. To escape punishment, Moses fled far from Egypt and traveled into the wilderness. He eventually arrived in the land of Midian. There he came upon a well where several young women were trying to water their flocks. Shepherds were harassing them and driving them away, but Moses stepped in and helped them. The women returned home and told their father, Jethro, what had happened. Jethro invited Moses into his home and welcomed him. In time Moses married Jethro's daughter Zipporah. Moses settled into a quiet life as a shepherd. Years passed, and what began as an escape turned into a new life. In fact, Moses spent about 40 years in Midian. But God had not forgotten Moses or the suffering of the Israelites in Egypt. One day while Moses was tending sheep near Mount Sinai, he saw something extraordinary. A bush was burning with fire, yet it was not being consumed by the flames. Curious, Moses moved closer to look. Suddenly, God spoke to him from the bush. God told Moses that he had seen the suffering of his people in Egypt and had heard their cries. God declared that he would deliver them from slavery and bring them to a land of promise. Then God revealed something astonishing. Moses would be the one chosen to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. Moses was afraid and uncertain. He questioned whether he was capable of speaking to Pharaoh or leading such a great people. But God reassured him and promised that he would be with him. God also gave Moses miraculous signs to demonstrate his power. With this calling, Moses returned to Egypt along with his brother Aaron, whom God appointed to help speak on his behalf. Together they went before Pharaoh and demanded that he release the Israelites from slavery. Pharaoh refused. Because of Pharaoh's stubborn heart, God sent a series of powerful plagues upon Egypt. These disasters showed that God's power was greater than the power of Egypt. The waters of the Nile turned into blood. Frogs covered the land. Gnats and flies filled the air. Livestock died throughout the country. Painful boils appeared on the people. Hailstorms destroyed crops and fields. Locusts devoured what little remained. Then a deep darkness covered the land for 3 days. Yet Pharaoh continued to resist. Finally came the most terrible plague. The firstborn child in every Egyptian household would die. Before this happened, the Israelites were instructed to mark their doors with the blood of a lamb. When the angel of death passed through the land, the homes with the blood on their doors would be spared. This event became known as Passover. After this final plague, Pharaoh finally allowed the Israelites to leave. Moses led the people out of Egypt in an event known as the Exodus. Thousands upon thousands of Israelites began the journey to freedom. But Pharaoh soon changed his mind. He gathered his army and chased after them. The Israelites eventually reached the shore of the Red Sea. With the sea in front of them and the Egyptian army behind them, it seemed there was no escape. But God performed one of the greatest miracles recorded in the Bible. Moses stretched out his staff over the sea, and the waters parted. A path of dry land appeared between towering walls of water. The Israelites walked safely across. When the Egyptian army followed them into the sea, the waters returned and overwhelmed them. With this miracle, the Israelites were finally free from Egypt. The people then traveled through the wilderness toward the land God had promised them. At Mount Sinai, Moses went up the mountain where God gave him the 10 Commandments. These commandments were laws that would guide the people in how to live, worship God, and treat one another. The journey through the wilderness lasted 40 years. During that time the Israelites often complained and doubted. Yet God continued to provide for them. He gave them manna from heaven to eat and brought water from rocks in the desert. Through all the challenges, Moses remained their leader and guided them according to God's instructions. Eventually the Israelites reached the edge of the land that God had promised them. However, because of an earlier act of disobedience, Moses himself would not enter the promised land. Before his death, Moses climbed a mountain and looked out over the land that the Israelites would soon inherit. After a long life of leadership and faith, Moses died at the age of 120. Though he never entered the promised land himself, Moses had fulfilled the mission God gave him. He had led his people from slavery to freedom and guided them toward their future. The story of Moses remains one of the most powerful and inspiring stories in the Bible. It is a story of courage, obedience, faith, and the power of God to change the course of history. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the Biblical Archive for more biblical stories and history. Thank you for watching this story on the Biblical Archive. If you enjoyed learning about the life of Moses and want to discover more powerful stories from the Bible, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. Here on the Biblical Archive, we explore the greatest stories, history, and lessons found in the Bible, bringing them to life for viewers around the world. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and share it with others who are interested in biblical history. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next story on the Biblical Archive.